the Slack comments temporarily. Right, do we all? Let's have a thumbs up, shall we? Who can see security controls and not the wrong screen that I put on originally? Well, thank you very much, Gadar. William, thank you. George, wow, look at that. B, everyone's cracking through. Okay, so let me start that again then, a little rewind there. Today, we're going to be talking about security in your data center. This is absolutely critical, and we'll discuss why it's critical and how we get to 100% security, which is what we all aim for. We're going to talk about physical controls. We're going to talk about technical controls and operational controls and managerial controls. And we're going to go into those in a little bit of details to show you how a data center and the data that is your customer's data is kept safe and secure from all sorts of different ends. As usual, of course, please poke some questions, comments, or anything in live chat. We'll pick those up as we go through. More questions is better because it always adds to the flavor of these things. So let's start by looking at a particular incident. Okay, in April 2021, the Department of Justice arrested a Texas man for plotting to bomb one of the AWS's data centers. Wow. The guy's literally going to come in and he's going to blow up one of the AWS data centers. Okay, according to authorities, he's going to use some TNT explosives, and he reckons he was going to kill about 70% of the internet. That's probably not true. That's a bit of an exaggeration. But you can imagine that blowing up one of the data centers in 2021, when they are still growing, still expanding, could have a massive impact on things. So no, it's basically really important that we bear in mind the vulnerability, okay, of data centers. Yes, they are physical structures, okay? We basically need to bear that in mind. We need to look at security controls and the potential results that could happen with an incident. Definitely someone was having a bad day. Well done, Kenneth. That's like a bad month if he's able to do that sort of thing. So nowadays we build in a lot of resilience and redundancy. That means that if we do lose a data center, potentially if you're in separate zones or working in the same zone, you will fall over to automatic recovery systems. And we don't go into that today. But let's have a little questions here. So I've got some reflection questions there. First of all, let's start with the first one up there. How does the recent incident, 2021, it's fairly recent, involved in a foiled bomb against AWS data center, highlight the importance of reviewing and enhancing security postures in a data center operation? Please feel free to chuck a couple of answers in live chat how you think that recent incident would reflect. Give you a couple of minutes really to type some answers. There is a link actually on that. I don't advise you to open it and read it. Yes, you can do in your own time, but we won't be going into that much detail with it. And some of it is really interesting what they say. So Greg basically hits a key one there. Importance of redundancy. Can we guarantee 100% that our data centers will not get blown up? The very simple answer to that, it's a rhetorical question, is no. We cannot guarantee that there will not be a total outage on a data center. So redundancy is great. Anyone else got any ideas around that? What's the importance of that? Kind of drifts onto the second question, really, doesn't it? Lives lost, yes, potential lives lost. Okay, so security is not going to protect people because they're a target. The building's a target, but the damage is always going to be lives lost as well, isn't there? Kadir says physical security is critical in cybersecurity. Physical security is really important, and you will see when we get further down the lines, we will look at designing a data center with security in mind, how we basically protect ourselves physically against any form of threat. Okay, drifting on to question number 3, because we kind of covered 2 there. Let's have a look at number 3. In what ways, physical security, in what ways can data center managers improve their emergency action plans and disaster recovery procedures in response to security threats like the one described in this article. Can you think of any way that we would prevent this sort of incident from happening? An email, yes, perfect. Conduct regular drills and simulations to prepare for various scenarios. Well, we covered that a couple of days ago when we talked about fire safety, didn't we? And things like that. Regular drills, constantly basically practicing those things so we know what we are doing when we have those issues. It's really important with the data center that we know what we're doing when the unexpected events happen. Daily audits and walkabouts, yes, checking the fencing's okay, making sure all the regular security stuff is working. Security checkpoints, yes. So for this example, a guy with a bomb, he's got to gain physical access to the premises. Okay, so that all falls around security checkpoints. Okay, Daniel, I'm going to tell you off for using an acronym in the chat window. If we can expand ESO, for ESO to obscure locations. SEO, search engine optimization. Now it's quite, let's think about what it's really good valid point there, Daniel. Yes, you can do things like that. Let's think about what a data center actually is. Okay, and what you physically see with a data center. I have very rarely seen a data center with a massive signage across the front going, "Hi, I'm a data center." Okay, they don't do that. Okay, but look at what they are. They are massive warehouses with generators outside. So they're not really hard to find. Most of them, you can probably look up the address on the internet for a lot of them, can't you? So it's not tricky to find the locations of these. I can see a couple of you typing in there, which is great. Big security risk are advertised. We have important information here. We know the information within all data centers. All information, as I said, knowledge is power. All information is valuable to someone. See Patrick typing in there, good. Patrick makes a very valid point there. Security through obscurity isn't exactly an option. And with the larger data centers, I suppose. I mean, even with smaller data centers, it's pretty hard to manage that sort of obscurity. I've seen small data centers set literally when data centers first started coming up, no one was building bespoke buildings. No one was going to go, I'm going to build a data center. As I think I've said before, people were literally going to empty warehouses, you know, on an industrial estate and going, wow, this is big enough. I can set up 5 or 6 server rooms in here with all the right data connections in it. I'm just going to run it essentially in this unused warehouse. Add a bit of security around the side of it. Bang, I've got a pop-up data center. Okay, so they weren't specifically designed. New modern ones, yes, they are, and you can put a lot more security involved in those items. So what strategies do we think, number 5 there, what strategies can data center operators employ to monitor and respond to threats originating from online platforms, including conspiracy theories, dark web formulas? What do you think a data center operator, strike manager, could do to protect themselves against these? George, again, very, very well. Thank you very much. Drills are basically going to help. What about thinking about threats that originate from online platforms? See Patrick and a couple of you typing some answers there. So we'll give you a couple of minutes to get, a couple of seconds rather, to get through that. It's always good to hear your comments on these ideas. Kadir, yes. Employee security awareness is a good one. Certainly making sure that your employees are aware of security risks. That's a good one, Kadir. I'm actually going to ask a question about that in a second. I can see several people are typing. Online terrorist activity planning post detection. Whoa, look at that's a mouthful and a half, isn't it? So, thank you very much, Kenneth. I enjoy my energy as well. I wouldn't do it if I didn't. Online terrorist activity planning post detection. Yes, okay. So it's obviously really tricky to detect stuff like this, but there are agencies and there are places that do monitor it. Certainly in the US, they obviously have the CIA, etc., that monitor this, internal securities as well, the FBI. So it's all these guys that monitor internal threats, and that's how they caught this one, because they basically picked up what he was going to do through some online chats, managed to catch him before he was able to even approach the building. Patrick there says, for non-physical stuff, having best practice for data protection, encryption, DDoS protection. We will go into DDoS later, have a little chat about that stuff. Prevention techniques. Good, certainly. So I'm going to literally drag you back to a valid point that Kadir actually made there. Employee security awareness. Okay. How many of you go through essentially a security door to get to work? Either coming in via a blip on a chip or a card or punch numbers. How many of you go through one of those to get into work? Everyone. I think we all do, says Logan. Greg says everyone. Patrick says I do. Lewis has put a hand up. I probably should have asked it the other way around. How many of you don't do it? And then seeing if anyone put a hand up. I see loads of you still typing. This is really good. We do, yeah. You go through it as well. Okay, so let's give you a couple of seconds to type things. I do B, yes, you do. It's not just an Amazon thing, Daniel. Loads of companies do this. Kadir says when he was working in the data center, we had to go through lots of security checkpoints. Wow, yes. Mohammed does, yes, beautiful. I do. Yeah, okay. So let's draw a line under that. That's fantastic. Yes, I think it's fair to say most of us literally go through a form of security check, whether or not it's a code on a punch code, or whether or not we have a card or a key or a bleeper. All of us go through something like that. On the other side of that, you've kind of got a badge, little name card or something like that. If we assume that in your building, everyone has a name card, a little badge stuck on their chest, on a lanyard, either put on their chest or on their hip or something like that. How many of you would actually challenge someone walking around your office that doesn't have one of those? Put a hand up if you would actually challenge someone who doesn't have one of those. It's an honesty box we'll deal with later. If they saw someone without that particular card or something visibly displayed. See a couple of you typing there, so we'll give you a minute then. Kenneth gets a gold star. I've done so. I've done so at my Amazon. Well done. Louis says too busy to notice at the time. A lot of us worked far too hard, don't we, Louis? At Amazon, all badges must be visible. Yeah, it's a great policy, but how many get challenged? And I think that kind of brings us back to that point of staff training, customer awareness. It's that sort of thing, isn't it? It's not quite how you normally pull up in the office, is it? Thank you very much for that, Daniel. Okay, so thank you for taking part in that. And we'll go into a little bit more about why I mentioned that security badge question in a while. So we kind of drop security controls into categories because we love categorizing things. So security categories tend to fall into these particular areas. So physical controls, okay, and we'll talk about those in some details. Technical controls, operational controls, and managerial controls. So physical stuff, we can assume, perimeters, security monitoring, intrusion alarms, limited entry points on site, and we'll talk in details about some of those as well. Technical controls are things such as your access controls, your CCTV, your intrusion detection. And there's operational controls, which deals with the hiring and termination policy. It's really important to get those right. Separations of duties, and we'll discover what separations of duties is. Red zones. Oh, we'll talk about red zones, very important in data centers. And I think they categorize them into red, yellow, and green zones. 4i protocol is one of the approaches that is commonly used in data centers, and we'll explain those in some details. And role-based permissions. Who's heard of role-based permissions before? And if you have, in what context have you basically heard about it? Again, that's another one for live chat. If you've heard of role-based permissions, doesn't have to be in relation to data centers, but who's heard of role-based permissions before? I can see a few of you typing in there. See if we get a good couple up. Derek's there. Permission based on position. At Amazon, we have problem solved permissions that let you differentiate things such as received items or deleted trailers. Yeah. Dylan says being a PIT and a GTDR trainer. Again, well, I don't have to tell people off about acronyms. That's fine. I have many permissions, only for trainers. I like access without restrictions. I think we all like that, but again, that doesn't protect us, is it? We've got to really deal with protection. Patrick says we use role-based permissions for which program different employees have access to, and what changes and data different people have access to. Yeah, role-based permissions. It's all out there. And indeed, we see things like that in, the Microsoft AWS, the Azures, all those entries basically have a lot of role-based permissions. Used to be a product called Active Directory Users and Computers that did it for Microsoft, but there are other horses and courses out there for sure. It's all based around the role and particular roles that you have. And we'll chat about that in a little bit of future. And then last but not least, there's managerial controls. Okay, this is where we talk about the policies, the procedures, regulations, the audits that have to happen, along with assessments, and a good old-fashioned employee training, which is so important. Employee training and awareness. And again, we have our vendor and third-party management to make sure it's not just the managers and the trainers that basically get involved, but we've got to look after our vendor. If our vendor has control of systems, and we need to make sure the managerial approach has basically taken all those things into consideration. Logan says in there, that's a good one. I like that. Our controls team have read-write permissions for the PLC code. No one else does. Again, this is done to protect the systems. It's really interesting. When I was a young man growing up doing IT stuff, I moved into one of my first IT management positions in a company. And that at that stage, that's when you can put your fingers in all the cookie jars. That's when you have full control of absolutely everything, because you're the guy who sets the permissions for everything up. It feels like a bit of a weight. It's a bit of a trusted permission. And you know for well, when things go wrong, it's normally you. So you try to lock it down as much as possible while still making sure your staff can get on with their daily jobs. That's the important balancing act that sometimes you play. Kadir worked on a mini project focused on security switching ports. Yeah. We granted access for just 1 day. A lot of data centers and places like that, you will see limited access granted. And it's very common. I know we're kind of drifting a bit, but I love talking about these things. Certainly at NATS, if you're a remote worker and you want to gain access to any one of the servers, whether or not that's on the safety side or a non-safety side, you have what's known as a remote access chip. Okay, and you have to apply for the remote access chip, and you have to say when you want it to start, when you want it to end. That's in your application. That then gets justified and goes all through. And you know full well, if you have asked for a 2-hour window, you will get just a 2-hour window. You'll get to that end of that 2 hours. Doesn't matter what you're doing. If you've only asked for 2 hours, they will slam that door shut on you. You can ask for extensions, of course, and most of the windows were set up around about 24 hours. But for critical systems, yes, there was a very tight leash kept on how long you can actually open that door, do the bits and pieces you want to do before that door is then slammed on you. Okay, so it is timed access. Very good. I love the access. Thank you very much for the comments in there. Okay, so we're kind of going to dip into a bit more details here. So security control functions. Preventative controls. Okay, these are proactive measures that are aimed to prevent security issues before they happen. Okay, they're designed essentially to stop threats from happening. Okay, that basically obviously reduces the risk, makes it much more safe. So that's the prevention. So we look at it in that particular way. So we look at it preventing the threat from ever happening. Then we have a detective controls. So detective controls, just like it says, this is where you notice that something has happened. So you can detect an unauthorized access, very much like we said, someone walking around without that badge on. That's a detective control, where someone walks up to that person and says, excuse me, you don't have a badge on. What are you doing in this building? So that's your detective control. Then we have the corrective control, which is basically the action you take. So that's in a response to a mitigating circumstance. In our case, with the guy walking around the badge, that's security turning up and politely asking the person to leave. And then we have things drifting onto deterrent controls. Okay, they're designed to discourage individuals from engaging in this one. In our particular case, where we have the guy with the card, this is very simply, yeah, you'll be fined, you'll go to jail, we'll inform the law enforcement agencies, you'll be locked up in a cell for a certain amount of time. But that essentially is a deterrent for people. And then we talk about compensating controls. So this is basically where the primary controls fall apart and you cannot fully implement something. Okay, but they provide alternative ways to manage and mitigate the risk. And that is really risk mitigation that we go into. So you may compensate people for a lack of security for their systems over a particular time because you know it's going to happen. No matter what you do, it's impossible for you to basically provide any of the first 5 controls that we basically had. So you kind of go, you know what, it's going to be a bit dodgy. We need to basically give them a little bit of a sweetie wrapper to see how they can control that. So they all play different distinct roles in terms of how we protect our systems. So within a data center, what we have is we have a layered security. First security, physical security around the outside, is the security perimeter. So we've got a big fence, we've got a big wall, we've got some security guards on the gated system. I'll talk a little bit more about the gated system later. And then we have facilities control. So if they get through the perimeter control, yes, they're then into the area, the estate of the data center, but they haven't actually got into the facility. So they're walking around the garden, they're having their tea and their picnic on the grass where they shouldn't be, and feeding the ducks in the pond that we've got. The next stage they need to get through is they need to get through the facilities control. This is your front door. They tend to have very few front doors, and we'll chat about that, but that is your facilities control. So once they're into the facilities, into the building itself, then each of the computer rooms, and we'll chat about which rooms are which, will then have a access control to that individual room. Okay, so no one will be able to simply walk into the facilities and then go, I'm going to go into this particular data room, or I'm going to go into this network area, or into this UPS systems. Okay, because there will be another set of controls, a physical door that someone will need to get through with a security pass, a code, or however they manage to secure that area. And then last but not least control is the cabinet control. You look at your data center cabinets that are 42U high, nice big things with things in. They all have doors on the front of them. Okay, so once you've managed to get into the cold aisle, that is where you get access to them, you would then normally have to use a key or a numbers pad, which is normally 4 digits. I think most of the ones I've seen have been 4 digits, 4-digit number pad to then unlock that cabinet, swing the door open before you can get access to the physical machines inside there. So that gives us a layered defense of security. So anyone got any questions about the layered defense of security? We've got some details there that you can read at your leisure. Those are the security details that we have. I know a few of you have seen data centers or worked at data centers. So if you've got any insights, please throw them into live chat. If you've got any experiences, always worth hearing from people that are doing the work. So that physical layered section should keep us all safe and basically look after our data. So there's a little discussion question at the bottom there that says, if you were designing the security for a new data center, what combination of access controls, surveillance and alarms would you recommend? You can put those into live chat. You can happily think about the layered defenses. Ideally, you should probably have 5 sets of answers here, or 5 layers in your security defense. I can see Daniel typing. It's a good question, this one. So we're going to give you a couple of minutes to think, simply come up with things. Simply Safe with Simply Safe. You'll never have to worry about security again. Kadir, gated entry with badge. RFID identification. Definitely good. And it's a horrible thing to say, but again, a lot of what it comes down to is the money end of things, in terms of how much does it cost us to provide a certain level of security. If you've got an X amount of budget and you spend a whole lot on just a massive fence and 20 security guards that are walking around your building, then you've not got the money to spend on the gated entry into the building or cabinet entries or security cameras or anything like that. Derek, fire alarms, we're probably talking more, yeah, I guess that is a bit of detection and prevention of that end. So yes, definitely, Derek. Kadir is basically on surveillance. Daniel basically says our building has facial recognition that can track you through the building. Wow, this is getting real sci-fi, isn't it? It's not sci-fi anymore. This is regular stuff. It's what we get nowadays. You literally know where everyone is. Yeah, at any time. There used to be some jokes years and years ago when I used to work at Microsoft. There was a little bit of a joke that they were actually going to install pressure pads on our seats to make sure that we were sat at our desk taking telephone calls for the right amount of time, and then have a little report at the end of the month saying your bum got off the seat at such and such a time, it was too long. So there was a little joke. They didn't actually do it in the end. At least I don't think they did. Okay, so we know now, yes, there are some beautiful stuff, and we go into some details on some of these. So there's a very quick section review. What's the primary purpose of data center physical security there? We know the primary purpose of data center physical security is essentially to protect the data and prevent people from gaining access to the building. So in the bomber case that we basically went through to start with, yes, we now know that we would have prevented that with our physical security things. What falls under the category of technical controls in the data physical security? We'll go through that in a bit. I know data centers used to be rated based on the physical protections that they offered. So they all got rated according to perimeter, facility, computer room, and cabinet controls. Not sure they rate it nowadays because everyone's got an outside fence. Okay, so let's have a little look at some more details then. Perimeter security and monitoring. Okay, we have an outside perimeter around our data center. It is our first entry point. Okay, it provides perimeter defense essentially for our data. I know we're physically stopping people getting in, and these are people that aren't hacking in through the internet or anything like that. These are people that physically want to gain access to the building. We know the perimeter can be monitored because we can monitor it with cameras. We can monitor it with not so much electric fencing, but with essentially devices that will tell us if a fence has been breached or if something has gone wrong. There can be walls, fence, bollards are typical things if you have a driveway, and how we protect the items there. Has everyone heard of the term tailgating before? Feel free if you want to quickly just describe tailgating in the live chat for me. Following someone in who has a badge. Yes, as simple as that. Okay, so someone punches it into the door card. You always see them in the movies, don't you? Someone opens the door, punches it, swings the door up and walks in, and then the guy dashes in just at the last minute, just before the door shuts. Tailgating is basically what that is. You will note that the majority of data centers have one entry point. Now, that's probably not true because they tend to have two. They have two entry points, one for physical vehicles to drive in, because of course we need to make deliveries and we need to have people coming on site with their cars. So they have one for the cars, and they will have one, which is normally a separate gate for people to walk through. Patrick says, we've got sensors that try to catch people tailgating in our warehouse. Yes, and why not? It is something that happens a lot. And this wraps around again to how many people would challenge someone that they thought had tailgated them through. So it's all about your training, your awareness, and being able to put your hand up and say, oh, hold on, you're not supposed to be here. You tailgated me in, having a chat to security. Some people are too shy about it, but it's really important. Even if you don't do it yourself, you can then go to security and have a chat with security and go, guys, this guy or this lady basically tailgated me through. This is when he got access. 99% of the time, they have got cameras on there anyway. So they'll be able to pick them out, facial recognition, and basically pick them out through the data center, hopefully anyway. But we do anti-tailgating with vehicles as well. So we have pop-up bollards. You let one vehicle through, bollards pop down, bollards pop up, stop another one coming through. Security staff. We have our very friendly security guard. Okay, and it's his job basically to check a lot of things that basically happen in the data center. So they will not only do just the patrolling of the outside to check on the security, check the fences, check no one's got access to, But in theory, they should be able to engage and approach any visitor, anyone approaching the data center. Oh, Bertrand, don't put we tailgate a lot. Others, you want to put others tailgate a lot. You don't want to have a complete confession on live chat. Well done. So it's their job to act as a physical deterrent. You see a big security guard or a security guard in there, then yes, you're less likely to do something wrong. You know you're going to get either patted down or your kit is going to have to go through that magic X-ray machine. So that's the physical guy. He's going to walk around. He's going to do a lot of checking of the physical structures to make sure everything is okay. We also have someone that's known as the data center security specialist. Now it's his job. They give it an acronym, DCSS. So they're responsible for the complete security of the data center 24/7. So they are dedicated. Their role is the day-to-day management of keys. Okay, so if you've got a data center that opens by keys, do we get the key back off the employee? How many keys have we got cut? Can that key be cut at a regular key center? Intrusion detection systems. So we should be able to detect anyone who intrudes, either breaches the initial gated area, the fenced area, or gains access to the physical premises. So we have intrusion detection systems on there. Pretty similar to your house, you know, if someone breaks into your house while you're away on holiday, they've got an alarm set. You've got an intrusion detection system, either on the door or the window, that pops and open, either detects motion within that room or breaks the electrical connection between it and then sets off an alarm. So these are intrusion detection systems, our regular alarm stuff. And as we so eloquently pointed out, surveillance videos, not only to pick up people doing suspicious stuff around your estate, but also to monitor where people are going. And it's also their job to do things like physical walkthroughs. There's a little discussion question down there. Let's do that one as well, because we're having such fun. What qualifications and training would you want security personnel at a data center to have? And why are they important? Don't focus so much on the qualifications, but what training do you think they need? You can put qualifications if you think you've got one. Concealed carry. I can tell we're dealing with an American audience, can't we? Well, the first thing they mention is carrying a gun, isn't it? Thank you, Kenneth. In the UK, all allowed is blunt sticks. That's what we have in the UK for security deterrence. Patrick says, is the data center security specialist essentially your head of security? Potentially, yes. That's where they tend to sit. But I think they kind of go, yeah, possibly along that sort of direction. They're the people that hands out the keys and make sure things. Technical training and surveillance, access control from Kadar. Yes, definitely. Alarms, incident response. They've got to be able to know how to use the kit. No point buying a really expensive piece of hardware, a fantastic security measure, if the guy doesn't know how to use it. So technical training. Daniel says, what's that thing that's essentially the art of folding clothes with people inside them? Something like that, wouldn't they? They don't all have to be very physical people, but they have to be able to look after themselves in a certain extent, don't they? And a lot of that is actually recognizing the threat. So it's not all gun-ho, it's not all carrying a concealed weapon, it's not anything like that. It's recognizing the threat, recognizing what level it is, recognizing whether or not you can deal with it yourself, or whether or not you need to call someone else. I mean, initially, as soon as you see something, they are going to make a call to the office going, yep, this guy's here, this is what I'm going to do, this is the approach, so that we all know something has basically happened. Oh, very, very good. NEMA, they're basically knowing the hazardous material identification and handling. Yeah, because these guys are going to be on site 24/7. It's important they understand fire safety. It's important they understand hazardous materials that might well be in there. You don't need a security guard running into the battery room with his Uzi 9mm and spraying loads of holes in your lead acid batteries, do you? It'll be no good for anyone. But yes, they're making sure they are capable of doing those things. Good stuff. Well, thank you very much for that discussion question. So we mentioned limited entry points. And we'll talk a bit about this later as well. Limited entry points, but multiple exits. That's the fun part of it. A data center should be as enclosed as possible. Okay. You know you are going to have multiple entry exit points. You're going to have more exit points, but you don't want people coming out of those by accident. They are fire exits. They should be alarmed, reduced access. Normally there is a single entry point. There's normally a guard posted at every single entry point. No one should be allowed in unless they are an employee of the facility with authorized to be on site. I don't care if you're just employed by the company, you've got to be authorized to be on site. They are an expected visitor. Yes, they've signed in, they've got a visitor's badge, they've got a passport. And a valid reason for being in the facility. Okay, or a vendor. So you kind of get guests and vendors that basically come out of these things. I had an incident over at NATS when I was accessing one of the data centers to provide some training for the guys. I turned up at the office, passport, ID. Thank you very much, Mr. Tonkinson. You can come in. Guy behind me, who'd actually been working for the company for 30 years. He was one of the most senior trainers they've got. Went up to the security gate and they said, "Where's your badge?" He said, "Oh, I've forgotten, I've left it at home." And they said, "Sorry, Bob, I can't let you in." Doesn't matter that they recognize him. You don't have the badge, you don't have the passport, you don't have the relative identification. You don't get in. It's as simple as that. It's go home. Yep, we know you're going to burn 2 hours. Go home, get your ID, come back, then we can let you in. It's very much like that at data centers. And if I love your comments, keep them coming. So it's important that these people will know who to contact. It's important that we all know who to contact. Okay, under many physical issues that will happen. So normally we have things such, we won't read through the whole list, but you can read it obviously at your leisure. But incidents tend to be dealt with unauthorized access, security guard, trespasses, security and police, fire department. It's all pretty simple and explanational stuff. Vandalism, security personnel, explosions, fire department and police. Yes, we're going to find the relevant people that deal with those things. But generally, yes, if you see something strange, it's security. You go to security, you go to security. If it's something big, like a fire or something, yes, then of course we get the fire brigade involved. But it's important you know who to contact. Do you all know how to contact the security guards? Do you all have automatic telephone numbers that are basically in there? Is it in your mobile phone? Or do you have to go and grab a landline that's on a desk somewhere? It's important you know how to do that. Nope, grab a walkie. Lots of data centers do actually have, when you walk into the data center, they will send you off with a communication device. Walkie-talkies have commonly been used, depending on the size of the buildings and the interference, because of course walkie-talkies are radios, aren't they? So potentially all our beautiful electrical equipment and our Faraday cages may mess up any walkie-talkies. But yeah, it's that sort of thing. Most of them will have a physical landline that is not connected to anything other than a physical landline, and you pick it up and you dial a special number, and that's how you get through to security. It's important you're aware of that and know how to get that access. Access controls. We know access controls basically can deal as a physical barrier as well as essentially software barriers on the systems. So our software controls how we get access to things. Does this through the example there's a good old-fashioned biometric, isn't it? I think that's a fingerprint scanner there. So we can do biometric controls to control who gets access to things. And we have an access policy that serves a cornerstone to who should get access to both the outlying building as well as the rest of the buildings. Okay, the general people that tend to get thrown into this are employees, people who work in the place, vendors, which is people that are, essentially providing some of your Cisco routers and Cisco toys in there, as well as the HP servers or whatever servers you're running, and escorted visitors. Now, it's my experience that in a data center, no visitor will walk around unless he has a NOC member of staff attached to his hip. As simple as that. He doesn't get access anywhere on his own. Someone will be with him 24/7 if he's on site. They don't follow you into the toilets, but the rest of the access is basically controlled by having a NOC member of staff on your hip. Vendors you tend to trust a little bit more, but they tend to get followed around by NOC staff as well, if I'm totally honest with you, because they are dealing with hardware specific. Anyone who gets access to a rack normally has a member of staff with them. Now we know we can have access control for visitors. We can have different types of security locks on here. So we can have our good old-fashioned electronic door lock, which is our little bleeper going through. We can have our badge readers that control things, as well as our surveillance from video cameras. So these are all important things for our security devices, and this is what we tend to employ. Now, I've got a very short video to play you, which is about data center security and risk management. First thing I want to see is a thumbs up that you get the audio to make sure that I've ticked the right button.
Your first key challenge is risk management, which can be addressed with a layered physical security approach. Risks are inherent in data centres, not just from cyber criminals or those with malicious intent, but also from third-party contractors and employees who may have access to inflict unintended or intended damage. Deploying a layered security strategy can provide you with the ability to deter, detect, or detain at every layer of your data center's security, reducing the risk of breach and increasing your peace of mind. The site perimeter is not just a border, it is the first layer of data center protection. Measures used to fortify perimeter security include video surveillance of the property perimeter, limited entry points with access control, physical security barriers such as reinforced walls or anti-ram fencing and gates, and guard stations with security personnel. These are all designed to deter intruders. Car traps and security personnel can delay intruders. The second layer of security addresses the space between the perimeter and the building exterior. This area is monitored by intrusion detection sensors and video surveillance to identify breaches. The third layer is the highest level of perimeter security, where you have the opportunity to prevent unauthorized access into the facility. The fourth layer of security validates access rights of authorized individuals into specific environments, such as your data hall, network operations center, entrance rooms, power and cooling facility areas. As you enter the data hall, the fifth layer of security is the selective profile of authorized staff, contractors and visitors to ensure access is limited and approved for this critical space. The sixth level of security provides controlled access and accountability directly at the equipment location. The interoperability of these 6 layers mitigates your risk, offering effective and efficient protection of your facility's critical data. The selection and sizing of the appropriate physical security list of materials can be quite challenging. Best-in-class technologies and the interoperability of components and subsystems are key considerations. Various stakeholders have different but equally important data center security concerns, Annexter will help you consider the individual needs of each department to meet the collective challenge of managing risk. In addition to data center security, Annexter...
I won't make you listen to the beautiful spiel at the end. Any questions about that video? We saw basically there the main 5 areas or 6 areas that basically we have to protect within the data centers. Any questions for anyone? I can see Daniel typing. I don't get any money for it, Daniel. No, it's not a sponsored ad. Missed opportunity, probably. B, how you doing there? I can see you typing away. That was like Fort Knox B. That was a regular data center. All data centers are built in that sort of direction. Like Fort Knox, yes. Okay, I'll give you an idea. When I first went to Nats's data center, was a totally different operation compared to IMART's data center, and they are graded in different levels. One thing Nats was really impressive. Theirs is a fantastic data center. They've got a couple of them. One thing I was told they basically have is the road down to Nats's data center is not straight. Okay, it is not a straight line. There's curves left, right, and center. There is no way any vehicle is going to build up any speed approaching those front set of bollards. There is no straight line when you're in the car park. There is no straight line in the car park onto the side of a data center wall. There is nothing that is a straight line. Okay, so it's really hard to think of let's build up some speed and just ram the place. You know, you're not going to get very far at 10 miles an hour because that's about as long as you've got. Also, to the extent that Nats has a lake area around the building. And you think, why are they putting a lake there? Is it just to put the fires out? That's what I thought when I first asked them about it. It's a lovely lake. What's it doing around the whole building? Stops people tunneling into your data center. That was the reason I was given. Stops them tunneling. Imagine you've got a lake 32 feet. No one wants to dig 32 feet down and then go along under what might be a lake and get dripped on. So yes, to prevent people tunneling into their data center. Classic technique, build a moat. Yeah, so they learned something, didn't they, from who was the first people who built moats? Probably William, wasn't it? 1066 end. So that's the things you expect. I saw a data center in Ironmart, small, tiny data center. They spent an absolute fortune on essentially what is a sniffing machine. So you know, you walk into essentially what is a sealed unit. So you open one door, you step in, closes, and the device basically then just sniffs you, and it will detect any nefarious materials that you have on you before it lets you out the other side. If it fails the sniff test, you get red lights going off, you get locked in there. So yes, they have a sniff machine. God knows why. It was only a tiny data center, but God, it used to impress customers when they basically had it. So it's all about that, isn't it? Good. So let's talk about motion sensors. So CCTV, closed circuit television. Yes, there's loads of different operations that are basically available in there, and they will put them all over the shop. They will monitor the entrance for the first entrance. They'll monitor the car park. They'll monitor the back entrance. They'll monitor every particular port that they can get to will be monitored by a form of 24/7 CCTV. But we have our motion sensors as well. So PIRS, passive infrared. I see a couple of you typing there. Is that coming? Some questions there coming up, Kenneth? So passive infrared. Right. Let's have a show of hands. Who owns a passive infrared device? Quick show of hands would be good. Greg says it's sale. Daniel says, yep. Probably should have asked you to put, where is it? Your cameras, are they per devices, Kenneth? Are they passive infrareds? Yeah, big tick from Kenneth, yeah. Or someone from ticking Kenneth's box there, thank you. Okay. Yeah, B's got one. I'm hoping B's got one, that's why she's typing. B, have you got one? At home security. Daniel's typing. Yinka. Thing in the facet that detects when hands are in front of it. Oh, faucet. Sorry, my apologies. Can't read sometimes, can I? You got one of those at home, Daniel? Yes, beautiful. Your watch. PERS, I'm not sure watches count as that, but yeah, yet to be proven wrong. Infrared measuring tape. Oh, I like that idea. Okay, the majority of us will probably have a passive infrared detection system at home. There's a very famous one that literally runs as your doorbell. So your beautiful Ring doorbell that detects people moving, doesn't detect people moving, it basically detects a change in the infrared. It's a passive infrared device. Most of your security cameras that record when they see things moving are PERS, passive infrared detection devices. Kadir, we'll come to that in a minute, actually. Kadir asks, how can access logs from badge readers and biometric systems be used for auditing and incident response in data center environments? Okay, so will motion sensor lights, most of them are PERS as well, yes. And the reason we use PERS is because they're passive. The old-fashioned way they used to do it is they used to have to send out radio waves to detect things. That, of course, costs lots of energy, whereas a PER is a passive device. So it is very simply accepting the radiation that's giving off, the infrared radiation that's given off by different heats. So as I walk in front of one, I'm warmer, and therefore it detects the fact that it's slightly warmer with more infrared radiation. Microwave are the other ones. Now, microwave basically continuously signals, so they are bouncing stuff off things. So they are sending out microwaves and detecting changes in distances. So they're great at detecting motions in larger spaces. You can imagine with an infrared device, a passive infrared device, if someone is stood, a fair few meters away, they won't set it off because there's very little radiation makes its way across. Whereas with a microwave device, because you are pinging stuff out, it is very easy to detect them from longer distances. So some of them now tend to use a dual tech hybrid device, where it basically does a bit of both. Microwave is more expensive because you are essentially using electricity to send out those microwaves. PER is basically just a passive one. That's why your Ring doorbells can just simply run off a battery for months on end because they're not doing anything. So let me show you how a PER device basically works. Again, if you can show me a thumbs up when you can actually see or hear it.
The following program is brought to you by Element 14, the electronics community where you can connect and collaborate with top engineers from around the world. Join now at element14.com/presents.
Hi, and welcome back to the Learning Circuit. In this video, I'm going to talk about one of the most popular motion sensors that can be found in security systems, lights, light switches, and more, the PIR sensor. If you've ever walked past a house at night or into a dark room and had the lights turn on automatically, they likely used a motion detector called a PIR sensor. PIR stands for passive infrared. Passive devices or components are those that do not generate energy, but can store it or dissipate it. Infrared is a form of electromagnetic radiation with wavelengths longer than visible light. Everything emits some low-level radiation, The hotter something is, the more radiation is emitted. PIR sensors contain pyroelectric elements that can measure infrared radiating from objects in its field of view. Let's talk about what that means. PIR sensors contain elements made up of a pyroelectric material. Pyroelectric materials are similar to the piezoelectric materials we've learned about with accelerometers. But where piezoelectric materials generate a voltage in response to movement, pyroelectric materials do so in response to temperature changes. A pyroelectric material sitting at an ambient temperature will generate no voltage. However, when that material is cooled or heated, it temporarily generates a voltage. This happens when the PIR senses a temperature change within its field of view. PIR sensors typically contain 2 or 4 pyroelectric elements. Just like with your eyes, each detects a slightly different area. So when an object that's warmer or cooler moves into view, it should be detected by just one element first, creating a difference between the two elements. That difference in temperature translates to sensing movement. However, with 2 elements, a sensor can only detect changes along one plane, like coming in left or right. With 4 elements, movement can also be detected from top and bottom. Though, even 4 elements may not be enough to detect movement in every direction, so mounting of the sensor should be considered carefully. Movement can only be detected once objects enter the field of view or detection area of the sensor. Looking at this array of sensors, you can see that viewing angles range from 62 degrees to 74 to 120 to 139 degrees and more. You may notice on some of these a distance is also noted: 12 meters, 2 meters, 5 meters. This is the maximum distance away from the sensor that it can detect change. Indoor PIR sensors may detect up to 20 meters, while outdoor models may be able to detect up to 150 meters. The detectable distance of a PIR sensor relies on how much of the environment the elements can see. The elements can be super tiny, but their field of view can be increased by adding a lens. You can see on this SMD PIR sensor that the model without a lens only sees 2 meters, while the model with a lens can see 5 meters. These lenses appear flat. To increase the detectable range, a certain type of lens can be used, a Fresnel lens. This PIR sensor's domed lens is made up of Fresnel lenses. My degree is actually in technical theater, so I first heard about Fresnel lenses when I was working with theatrical lighting. I was fascinated when I found out how they work. Fresnel lenses were designed to save on weight, space, and material while achieving the same qualities of a larger and denser lens. A normal lens is a solid piece of glass forming a continuous convex arc. That glass can be heavy and uses a lot of material. With a Fresnel lens, the curvature is broken down into slices, and those pieces are flattened into a much thinner lens, but still maintains the angles of the original. By adding a Fresnel lens, the detection range of a PIR can be increased significantly without drastically affecting the size of the device. Fresnel lenses were traditionally made of glass that can withstand the heat of the lamps. Since PIR sensors don't get hot, their lenses can be made of plastic. A traditional Fresnel lens looks like this, with circles rippling out from the center. This is what a PIR sensor Fresnel lens looks like. This PIR sensor has a lens broken up into 128 detectable zones, split between its 4 elements, increasing accuracy and the distance of the detectable area. So when an object, say a sheep, passes in front of the background, the temperature at that point in the sensor's field of view will rise from the ambient temperature to body temperature and then back again. The sensor converts the change in infrared radiation into a change in the output voltage, and this triggers the detection. Some PIR sensors come as just the sensor unit, often with 3 pins being ground, signal, and VCC. Others come soldered to built-in processors that can help convert the analog data into a digital signal. This type of unit is extremely popular with hobbyists. It's cheap and easy to interface with. It has the same 3 pins, but also 2 pots that allow the user to vary the sensitivity and delay time for the sensor to respond to changes in its field of view. Careful when buying this type. They may all look the same, but upon closer inspection, the lenses on some are not true Fresnels, just plastic covers. Real Fresnel lenses will have multiple thumbprint-looking patterns as seen from the inside of the lens. But either way, the specs on the datasheet should be correct for that model, so just be sure to check. When looking for PIR sensors out in the wild, you might find them in security systems, contactless light switches, and motion-reactive holiday decorations. PIR sensors are only one of various types of motion sensors, but they're probably the most popular among hobbyists for their price range and ease of use. Have you used a PIR sensor in a project? I'd love to hear about it. Post about your project builds and any other questions you have on the Element 14.
Wow, that was a fantastic explanation of PIRs, wasn't it? Anyone got any questions around that interesting video that we just watched? Good, we all understand PIRs then. That is fantastic. Okay, they are very cheap. They are very common. They are very popular because of those reasons, because they are cheap, easy to install. Great for security cameras, great for Ring doorbells, great for a multiple amount of users. So that's good for detection and working out what happens. We also have intruder alarms. So these are simple. I mean, we've run across intruder alarms all over the place at the moment, haven't we? Okay, and the idea is they will very simply notify when someone is in a building or in a room that they shouldn't be in. They are used for particular security areas, and we'll talk about, you know, the red, the yellow, and the green areas, and they are much more popular in red areas because people should not be in red areas unless there's something going on there. We're familiar with these in our houses and our properties because a lot of us have alarms on our systems. And we set our alarms and then basically it detects when intruders are about. Does anyone need me to go into any details with intrusion alarms? I think it's something we're pretty familiar with, for want of a better word. We will be having a quick break in a little bit after this. So unless anyone's got any questions. Normally, intrusion alarms and PIRs are used in conjunction with each other. They back each other up. Why not? Let's have both forms of detection. Good stuff. So I think now we're going to break for our 15-minute coffee break. You can get a coffee, a comfort break, apple or a banana. And we'll come back in 15 minutes and we will whip through the rest of the content. Wow, welcome back everyone. I hope you're loving the tunes. Amazing selections we're having at the moment. All right, let me see a thumbs up from everyone that can see the hiring and termination policies. Yours, thank you very much. Kadir, Teng, Daniel, Fatima, isn't it? Isn't it? Patrick, Christopher. Oh, that's good. Well, hopefully you've all had a quick break. Your apple, your pancake, or whatever it is you haven't have on your break. I don't know who's going to cook a pancake in that time. Okay, so we have covered a bit of an introduction. We've covered physical security controls and technical security controls. So we've covered the, the big burly guy on the gates, or the protection, or the fencing and all that end of things. We've also covered things like our PIR systems, our security cameras and intrusion detection systems. So let's drop into essentially hiring. So operational controls here. So hiring, yes, it's really important that hiring and firing work together with security. It's one of those critical ones. Okay, the important thing is when you hire someone, you give them security access, and when they leave the company, you take away that security access. Okay, it's got to be given to a person with the individual skills, necessary experience and integrity. We've basically got to look for the right people. So not only is there a process that brings someone on board and takes someone off board in terms of their security access, but we've also got to make sure we hire the right people. So remember I said earlier on, yeah, when I first became an IT manager and I got all my fingers in the pies and it was beautiful to be able to play with everything. The reason I got into that particular position was because I showed a certain amount of integrity. People gave you that trust and looked at you and kind of looked me in the eye and said, David, I trust you not to read everyone's payroll packets. I trust you not to read things that are going on in the business with the director stuff and other things that are happening around the world for that particular company. And yes, you prove that trust and you get on with it. Within data centers, it's fairly similar. I mean, you don't get as much control over it. Certainly when you're a NOC engineer coming in to start with, no, you won't get full access. But let's be honest, you are walking around and looking after people's servers and people's data. So there is a certain amount of integrity that's needed, a certain amount of experience, maturity that's needed to work in those environments, which which is essential for those particular jobs. So the HR needs to make sure they're rigorous controls. They will put them through security checking if it is in a security environment, and they will make sure that they are hiring the right people. And when that person leaves the company, like I said, it's the badges. You want to make sure you get that badge back, or that badge is at very least deactivated as soon as that person is walking off the building. Because if that person then gets re-entry with that badge, all hell's going to break loose. Has anyone got any experience of people regaining access into premises after they've basically left the company? See Daniel typing in there as well as Kadir. Kadir, my apologies. I guess most people are a bit shy, if you've kind of left a company, to walk back into that company. Daniel says, I have when I got terminated. I just walked back in and grabbed my mouse pad and water bottle, walked back out. Zero security. I mean, it's that sort of a thing, isn't it? There are some people, some environments need to be watched heavily. Some environments you can get away with. In my time as an IT manager, I had someone basically phone me up, literally claiming that their logon for their Office 365 account terminated, and they wanted me to basically reset their password and send them the details. And they said, "Oh, you send it to this particular address because I can't get hold of it. Let's send it to this personal email address." At which point the red flags start flying around, and you check and you kind of go, "Actually, mate, you were terminated yesterday. I remember closing your account." So it's that sort of thing. And of course, people can do this with physical environments as well. Our data centers have to be super strict about that. They should not get past the security guard. That's why, even if the security guard recognizes you, knows you, and can say, "Yes, Bob, you've worked at this company for 20 years. If you do not have that security pass, and that security pass, if you have it, bleeps red when they try to let you through the gate, they will not let you in because it's simply not worth their job." Kadir says one of her friends and colleagues, he got fired and he erased the storage after he left the company and the police got him. You will get into big trouble. It's all about trust, and it's very much not worth getting into that. If you do happen to leave a company, try and leave on good terms, because you don't want to burn your bridges, do you? We'll see very interesting comments coming in there. Okay, but HR basically get involved with that. If HR don't work closely with security, HR can sack someone. Security doesn't know about it. They don't cancel the pass. They don't cancel all the accounts. So IT, security, HR expands. So it's important that everyone gets involved in those conversations. So we said we talk about permissions and approach. Role-based permissions. Role-based permissions are fantastic because rather than worrying that Joe Bloggs needs to get access to a particular state, needs to get access to a particular room, and needs to get access to a particular cabinet, if you can say that Joe Bloggs and two other colleagues are in this particular role and their job will access X, Y, and Z, you can just go, well, that's a role. So when someone moves out of that role and stops doing it, and someone moves into that role, well, we're just adding them into permission groups, which is really useful. And this is what Active Directory uses in computers. So ADAC basically does. There's a special, someone's going to remind me what's the Microsoft one? No, I'm getting senile moment. I won't remember it yet, but there's certainly a Microsoft one. There's groups involved. Yes. I mean, group policies are involved as well, but there's a online one. Perhaps I shouldn't be talking about it. But yes, definitely permissions and roles are great. You put people in and out of groups, and that's the idea. Okay, they tend to be software controls, and it's not just things such as your Microsoft account or your AWS account or anything like that that you access. It's also things such as the security components. So your card will allow you to swipe into particular rooms based on the group that you happen to be in. So it's all done through that security method. And it controls where you basically go in the buildings. Remember, we said you not only does your security guard get you access through the fence at the front, it gets you access into the building. And then once you're in the building, that controls you getting access to the rooms. And then essentially into the data cabinets. So it goes all through that. So just by controlling it in one group, you can say this particular group guy can get access to most of the building in these data rooms, and a different group can get access to this and these entries. So it's all about how that permission is controlled. Let's be honest, we don't want our FD gaining access to the server room, do we? So the second thing that's basically done on that is what's known as the 4 eyes approach. Now feel free to put a hand up if you ever heard of this sort of thing before. The 4 eyes approach represents an additional layer of security. It basically says there must be 2 people when dealing with essentially a critical operation or a decision that requires approval. So some of these examples might be if you were to go, if you're in a data center and you were looking to replace one of your core switches, one of your core Cisco ASA 5000s, you would probably want 2 people to go and do it so that they are taking the right one out and you double check it and he confirms it and they are making the right changes and it's double checked and confirmed by essentially someone else. This does 2 things. It makes sure, yes, you are following the procedure and doing it correctly, but it means that at no point should there ever be one person doing that task in that room. One person is more likely to do something nefarious than 2 people. Okay, so that again adds and boosts your security. So that is what's known as the 4 eyes approach. The next way that it helps us, operation control helps us, is with the separations of duties. Okay, essentially it's a reinforced security measure that's in there. Okay, it helps prevent the risk of fraud and errors and unauthorized activities by simply making sure that no one person has control of a total process. So there's no one person, for example, that allocates security badges. Okay, there should be 2 people that does it. If one person is physically doing it on a machine, the other person should get a notification. So there should always be something, a sort of a weights and a balances, a check, something that basically checks it and makes sure that it is done right. And then it is the right person going into those particular groups. Remember, single people are prone to make mistakes. We know we're all human. No one's going to jump at you because you get something wrong. They'll jump at you because you don't check that something is right. And it promotes, essentially, as it says, it promotes transparency. Yes, I've done it. Well, if you're shy about doing it, then surely you should be checking with someone else. If you've done it and you're okay, and someone says, actually, you did that slightly wrong, you shouldn't have put me in that group, you put your hand up and go, yes, oh, you're probably right. Let me correct that. But if you do it on your own, then that just runs through and that just carries on happening. And there's no transparency or accountability in that particular process. So getting these processes in allows us to do what we know as the separation of duties. There's a small example there. What I'd like you all to do is if you can read that example there, and then we'll have a couple of little questions. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. I've got 36 minutes past. Let's give you to about 38 minutes past. So we'll give you to 38 minutes past just to read through that particular example, and then we'll have a quick chat about it. I can see George and Patrick typing away there. Okay, any comments about that particular example here? There's an example there of a data center, new hire, data center level 1 technician. See a couple of you typing there. Patrick says, pretty sure separation of duties is used in my current job. It's very good. Yeah, for all the different permissions and editing items and dispositions. Yeah. Can't even imagine if that's done manually or per person basis. There are some classics where essentially separations of duties are essential at times. George says, level 1 DC tech should probably have limited read permissions. That way they won't change important documents. You're probably right. When you come in as a DC1, knock 1, there's loads of different terminologies for it. So level 1 DC technician, you tend to be fairly restricted in terms of what you can and cannot modify. You obviously need to do your job, but modifying things like processes and things like that, you may not be able to get access to. Or accessing network software with no experience. And Dan says, Jackson, you, my reading is limited, is already very limited. Yeah, and Kadir basically hits it on the head there, basically saying that is that using the RBAC, essentially, which is the acronym for it, for assigning permission based on roles ensures that level 1 data technicians can access the necessary systems. So they've already decided, someone's already done a lot of thinking and gone, that's what our level 1 data sector technicians should have access to. No one has to rethink it, you know. So when they start, they just go, bang, thank you very much. You're in with a level 1 data center technician. But have you fallen asleep on your keyboard? Just checking there. It'll put a lot of slashes across there. So these are pretty good examples, aren't they, of where we are using things such as our role-based access control lists to control who gets access to what. And it's really easy to put people in and out of groups. And indeed, for things like remote access, I use that as an example for NATs. Remote access is performed simply by placing that individual person into that role for a limited time space and then removing them out of that role when we are slamming that door. Probably picking up your laptop and wandering around the office or something. It's okay, Fredo. I don't mind people typing lots of slashes in there. No problems. Patrick says, I've heard that some forklift speeds are capped based on different tiers of time spent. Wow, that's fantastic, isn't it? Where they're controlling the speed of the forklifts depending on your experience, depending on how many hours you manage to clock up. So role-based stuff can be used to add and as well as subtract from people's roles and permissions, so preventing them doing things. Good stuff. Okay, let's have a little chat about the zones in your data center. Dinka, how you doing? Oh, question. Can role-based access controls be combined with POLP? Only if you tell me what POLP means. Expand that for us all so we can all have a good guess on that. Principle of least privileges. Yes, they can basically be done because they do overlap slightly. Now, role-based access controls, yes, very much a case that you are telling them which group they go in, and when they are added to a group, they get those particular permissions. And it combines with a policy of least permission, because you know full well you can put people into multiple groups, and those groups may have conflicting ideas. So you may put them into one group that says, yes, you can have access to all these file services. And then you put them into another group that says you don't have access to these file services. In which case, yes, we are very much applying the policy of least permission is the recommended way to do this. And we do that with networking as well when we talk about network infrastructures, potentially in the future or something along those lines, where we basically have a zero trust network. That's a very common phrase nowadays, zero trust network, which basically says you can access absolutely nothing unless someone has told you you can access it. And that's done for network devices. And that's a very secure way to do things. Does that answer that one for you, Yinka? Perfect. Derek says defense in depth. Yeah. The idea is simply to give people as little permissions as they need to do their job. Because if they've got more than they need to do their job, why do they need that more? Why are they accessing those particular services? Why are they able to change details on routers and switches? Why are they able to go into this particular room? Remember, a lot of the stuff we're dealing with in this is all about room access. Why does someone whose job it is as a data center technician and his main role is going to be wandering around, checking on servers, swapping out hard disk drives, upgrading memory and racking things in the server racks, why should he have access to, for example, the switch center or the power grid? You know, the power rooms where basically your backup power is existing. No, he shouldn't have access to those. So it's just the one, least base. Let's get them just doing the minimum amount of things. And when they pass the exams and they get the theory done and they get the proper training, yes, well, then all of a sudden, oh, yes, all of a sudden you can go now and you can perform duties that involve you going into the network center and potentially making some cabling changes with some of the switches. And then you add them to that group that says, this person's allowed to go into that particular room. I can see Patrick typing there. Hold on. Let's see what we've got, Patrick. Patrick says we encountered some issues at work right now that seem they likely might be improved by adding in more permission restrictions. Not a security problem. An example of too many free permissions being given. It's really fun when you start dealing with permissions. A lot of viruses are able to propagate around systems if you have loose permission controls. Because the virus it may be that someone's hacked in or you've got a virus that's basically got hold of a user login. And that user login, if that user login has too much broad information and too much broad access, yes, all of a sudden they can go and do an awful lot more stuff. Now, unfortunately, a lot of companies, when they have an attack such as that, they go knee-jerk reaction and massively lock everything down. And then the first thing you have is staff coming into work going, actually, I wanted to change that, but now I can't because of the permissions. And then they have to fill out a single page application to get access to it, by which time it's a bit irrelevant. Okay, so it's important you lock it down as tight as needed, but without restricting what people need to do for a day-to-day job. And it's a horrible balancing act. But it's something that potentially we won't have to deal with, not until we rise up and get above not level 1, 2, 3. It falls into that sort of area where the management need to deal with those permissions. That's why it's all under operational controls. So answer that for you all. Okay, that's great. So let's have a little chat about zones. The zones in data centers tend to be worked very. I like to think they're done in a confusing way, but they're probably not. This is just probably me. Okay, so zones we have tend to be broken up into red zones, yellow zones, and into our green zones. Now, a lot of the time this is true, and a lot of the time you can break them up in that way, which is great. So let's stick with this. So a red zone represents the pinnacle of security. Okay, this is where people should not go in your data center. Okay, or only very few people should have access to some of those. Can anyone think of a red zone in a data center that you would not want people to go into? Even your staff in a data center. Please refer to type it into the live chat where you think would be a red zone in your data center. Nima there, certainly power room. Yes, why would I want everyone to be able to get access into my power room? Probably the only time we go into our power room is when we have to manually make a switch. Why am I making a manual switch in my power room? Yeah, it's very good. Server rooms do actually fall into the red zone because we want maximum security in those. Okay, which is quite interesting. I kind of go, really, they're yellows, but they're not. They're red. We want full control over anyone moving into our server room. Greg says UPS. Yes, again, power rooms, UPS. This is our power infrastructure. Why would we want to open up access to anything that involves our power in our data center? Daniel, anything that involves a manhole cover? Crikey, I haven't seen a manhole cover in a data center for ages. But potentially, yes, you're right. Why would we let people onto manhole covers? The raised floor. Bertrand, the raised floors are interesting. Raised floors are throughout the entire buildings. Okay, so it is tricky because in theory, if you have a room, that room security should go from ceiling to the base of that floor, not to the raised floor. So in theory, you shouldn't be able to get under the crawl space of a raised floor and crawl into another room. So there should be a form of separation between those, physical separation between them. Not a total separation, because of course you need to pass cables between them. Power cables will need to go through there, as well as data cables. So we need to basically have a way of getting things through, but people should not be able to crawl through those spaces. What's a grey room, Yinka? Ah, you're dealing with the grey and the white rooms. Grey areas and white areas in data centers. We'll talk about that probably next Tuesday, I believe we come into that section. This is why I say sometimes, Yinka, it's a little bit confusing about some of it. Patrick's got a very good point. Yep, security room itself. So security should be the only people allowed into the security room. Oh, Daniel says that's the way it is. Okay, so that's the manhole cover. So Daniel says most concrete foundations here in Arizona will have a water access for sewage, water treatment access, also drainage for the monsoon season. Very true. Okay, they tend to define the access. We'll run through the access, what we have here. Thank you, Yinka. If you carry on typing, I'm ready to read it as it pops up. So the access to red zone is tightly controlled and restricted, authorized personnel only. It's typically where you put your servers, your data, if you've got any data racks, networking equipment, and other mission critical components. Okay, I don't know why they don't break it into a red and an amber zone. I consider the servers to be something that we will be accessing regularly. Yeah, we know we only do it for maintenance, we do it for installation, but it's more of a regular access than I would consider any of my networking infrastructure. So if I'm talking about my big switches that constrain my network, that manage my pipes that are going out to my ISPs, that are managing the data communication that happens around and between my different data rooms, I would bang that as a red room. And I've seen big locks, I've seen big cages around these devices to prevent anyone getting any access to. Excuse me. Whereas our racks, yeah, most of our knock staff will be wandering in and out of our racks. Okay, but bear that in mind. So traditional security access in red zones will be tight. It will be biometric access controls. Surveillance cameras are going to be on there. Stringent authentication process to prevent any unauthorized entry. And these potentially the areas that you might only get timed access. You'll also get alerts if there's any breach, any tailgating or anything like that should basically come up as a red flag. And any modifications to those particular locations. So modifications within the red zone have rigorous security and require explicit authorization. This is what I kind of separate from the general data warehousing and where the servers and stuff are controlled. Because most of the time, if you're changing network components and you're doing things that are going to affect multiple areas, yes, you would then have explicit authorization to ensure the integrity. If you're doing something with some of the servers, yes, you will have permission to do it and you'll be asked to do it. I think the term explicit is probably a little bit too much, but yes, definitely they are controlled under the red zone. Any questions about the red zone access? Good, we're happy about the red zone. So shuffling onto the yellow zone. Again, this is positioned as an administrative hub of the data center. Okay, these are the bits and pieces that, unlike the red zone, are less restricted. Okay, so authorized personnel can perform routine administrative tasks and functions. Things such as checking your DRAC systems, your diesel generators. Yeah, that probably falls under a yellow zone. You want people to be able to get access to that. It's a regular maintenance. It's something that happens every day. You may want to buddy that up and basically have two people going around, which is how you protect it. But essentially, that is a yellow zone. General support functionalities. In that, again, is your knock room. So where you guys will basically be living. Workstations, desktops, data center technicians are basically typically located in the yellow zone. And that's where you tend to live, and then you get access into the red zone when you need to do the fiddly technical bits that require some physical entrance. The bottom of that yellow zone basically says, despite comparatively relaxed access control, security managers such as badges, authentication, surveillance systems are still in place to maintain. Yes, very much so. It's really important in the yellow zones what we are doing. Okay, because we know we get access to important equipment in the yellow zone. So it's important that we do maintain a certain amount of control over that. And then last but not least is our green zone. This represents the outer perimeter. This is when you're outside the data center. Okay, so it's a bit more flexible. Access control in the green zone tends to be a little bit minimal, only because, yes, it's outside the data center. What can they physically do? They probably already walked through the main gate to it. They parked up. That's still a green zone. Okay, it's specially designed for visitors, delivery personnels. Can anyone give me an example of essentially another green zone or a room in a data center that might be considered a green zone? Yeah, a couple of you typing in there. Reception, yeah, bang on. Daniel basically slips in there. Reception, break room. More relaxed, certainly. Security in a break room than you have, where you have zero access to anything. So you really only have access to your tea and your coffee. Break room, yeah. Cleaning closet. Don't let the cleaners anywhere near your systems, whatever you do. Sidewalks, yeah. So it's that sort of area. And certainly if you have a customer that is visiting you, you will probably have a customer prep room where the customer can take their hardware, they can stick it onto a desk, they can prep it if they need to make any changes in there, or a customer may have been asked to take something off of a rack and they put it into a prep room, which has virtually no connections to anything. This is where they can change the processors, change the disk drives, change the memory in the system, close it all up, they hand it back to a knock technician and go, okay, can you go and put that back in my rack now? And the customer never walks onto the data center. The customer simply stays in that prep room. They're probably allowed into the break room as well. Not into the cleaning cupboard though, for God's sake. Okay, so there's very little regulations in there. And we're happy for the customers to wander around in there, because to move anywhere from that room, they would then need to pass essentially into a yellow zone where they do not have a security pass to do, unless they tailgate you. So that's how they tend to be broken up into those three zones. The red zone, which is super critical. No one gets access to that without any multi-diverse security measures happening in there. Yellow zones, which are more flexible, where your data center technicians will live and do their hard work. And then the green zones, which are inside your facility, normally, through the front gate, but still have a small amount of security, but you are happy for people to wander around. Car parks, break rooms, receptions, sidewalks. Good. Anyone got any questions around that end? Around the zones? Now, the reason I mentioned things like grey zones. No, Yinka, on Tuesday, we will be talking about white and grey zones. I will try to deconfuse everyone when I start talking about those as well. But think about these as your security zones. Good stuff. Okay. So Kadir asked a question earlier on. I said we come back to it. He asked, how can access logs from badges, readers, and biometric systems be used for auditing and incident response in a data center? Now, we know full well that auditing is really important within data centers. We need to know who has gone in and out of rooms. I think the game was in the clue, probably. When you're auditing something, all systems get audited in this particular way. As soon as you beep through into rooms, you get audited. So that goes in a magic log, and that magic log is usable. So that magic log will tell the system who has accessed which particular rack, which particular day, which particular time. This is why it's important you do not tailgate in a data center. Now, even if you have a badge, you need to beep in. So even if I'm following a colleague, there may be 2, 3 of us, we're all going to do the same job. We've all got the same badge. We've all got the same permissions. First person through the door beeps, opens the door. Second person must log themselves. So they must beep again with their card. The third person beeps again with their card. And that means we can audit things. This is where the biometric systems come in for auditing processes. Because we can then say on Tuesday, 3 o'clock, these 3 people were in this particular room accessing this particular data rack. And it's not just to keep an eye on what you're doing, but it's if a customer comes back to us and says, I think there was a change made to my particular server at this particular time, who was in that room, you can go, well, actually, no one was in the room because our audit logs are great. No one entered that room at that time. Or you can say these 3 guys were in it, but they were working in the rack up the road. We have the audit log. There's our proof. So you can demonstrate to customers. So it builds customer confidence that you know where your staff are, which rooms they've got access to, and what they're doing. So that's really quite important. Where it helps with things such as incident response. With incident response, with these particular logs, we can tell people such as the fire department, Kadir, exactly. So evidence for future incidents, exactly that. And indeed for things like incident responses, yes, we know who was in the room when something went wrong. We can also use that potentially to tell people who's still in that particular room. So for example, the fire department, we may want to tell them who's still in that particular building or still in that particular room. At IMART and certainly at NATS, you didn't just beep into the room, you had to beep out of the room. So if you didn't beep out of the room, it wouldn't let you into another room because you are still in one of the rooms. So you had to go all the way back and beep yourself back out of that room, or contact security and tell them that you've made a small mistake by not beeping out. So it's important you're beeping in and beeping out of rooms. Big Brother, who said it would never watch us, eh? Does that answer that question for you, Kadir? Great stuff. So coming towards the end of it, let's have a look at management controls. So we've got this one to cover. We're doing quite nicely for timing, which is absolutely perfect. Might get us off a couple of minutes early. We're looking at the weather out in the UK. Beautiful out there. So assets, assessments and auditing. One thing is really important is that we demonstrate to people that our systems are safe, our systems are secure. Now we do this with auditing and pen testing. Penetration testing, pen testing, often known like that, involves essentially faking a cyber attack, okay, to identify some vulnerabilities and weaknesses in the system. So you're basically paying a third-party company to try and break your system, not to break it, to break into your system. Okay, so it tends to be conducted by a couple of experts for a third party that you hire, and they will assess the risk and they'll give you a beautiful 50, I mean, I'm not joking, they can be 50 pages of reports telling you where your vulnerabilities were, where they were able to get to, where they were able not to get to, what ports were open on various things and network devices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you this very short video, it says, which will explain pen testing for you. Can be quite a complicated thing, and then we'll have some questions on it.
Penetration testing has become an integral part of a comprehensive security program. A simulated attack on systems or an entire IT infrastructure, pen tests expose the weakness in your core attack vectors, operating systems, network devices, and application software. The idea is to find and secure vulnerabilities before attackers exploit them. Pen testing has never been more important than it is today. With DDoS attacks, phishing, ransomware, and countless other tactics used by increasingly sophisticated cybercriminals, the best defense starts with knowing your strengths and weaknesses. As Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, if ignorant of your enemy and yourself, you are certain to be in peril. Pen testing provides intelligence and insight into how to mature your security organization by understanding how you could be and likely will be attacked, and what steps you need to take to secure your organization. However, penetration tests are not created equal. If you were to Google pen tests, you would likely find an assortment of companies offering to conduct inexpensive, fast tests geared to help meter your PCI requirement or some other compliance standard. Pen tests need to be about more than checking a box. They need to be the critical starting point to improved cyber defense. Further, one important thing to remember, vulnerability assessments are not pen tests. Vulnerability assessments provide a prioritized list of vulnerabilities and how to remediate them. Quality pen tests have a goal in mind, whether that is to hack into a specific system, breach a database, or simply probe as an attacker would to find hackable systems. Pen tests are conducted by ethical hackers to mimic the strategies and actions of an attacker. The 5 steps in pen testing should be: 1. Find a vulnerability. 2. Design an attack. 3. Appoint team of ethical hackers. 4. Determine what kind of data they could steal. 5. Act on the findings. Quality penetration tests should give you deep insight into the organization's overall security posture, and more importantly, how to prioritize vulnerabilities found in the test, and eliminate them in order to improve the organization's security maturity.
Good, really short video just about pen testing there. So, who's heard of pen testing before? Put a hand, show of hands if you've heard of pen testing. Daniel, good. Kadir, beautiful. George, Daniel, Patrick. So, a lot of you have heard of pen testing. Ah, but Fatima, Daniel, I've been down the hackathon, Red Hat, YouTube rabbit hole before. Beautiful stuff. Physical and digital pen testing, both. Well, I've read quite a few pen testing results, and they are fascinating reads, to be honest with you. And depending on which company you go to, depends on how much detail they will ask you to provide. Generally, you tend to set them a goal. You tend to say, here is an external IP address. These are particular servers. Try and get details from this particular database. And off they go. So you need to give them a very small amount of details on your systems to basically allow them to at least hook in or get the right direction, to save them years trying to find the thing. And then off they go. Kadir did a CEH version. CEH again. Acronyms. Try and avoid them if we can, please, so that everyone can understand. So the idea with pen testing is literally, they are literally trying to bombard, to ethically hack your systems to try and get into your system. They are not, well, you've got to be really careful. They're not trying to break it. They're just trying to get hold of data. But you've got to be careful, because when they do this, some of it can be through brute force. Some of it can be through trickery. Some of it can be through small configuration changes if they can get onto the system. So you've got to bear in mind that what they are trying to ethically hack, do it on a quiet day where you've not got loads of stuff happening, because if it goes wrong, or if there's something, they click something they shouldn't have done, it can have some effects on it. Now, not only do you do pen testing from outside, because of course our networks are expansive, aren't they? You know, within a data center, we have to separate things. We separate them with VLAN, so we may have our kit, we may have customer A kit, customer B kit, customer C kit, and we're all separated via network stuff. It's important not just to consider pen testing from an external point of view, where you kind of give them one external IP address, but also from an internal point of view. Can customer A get access to customers B's data through a hacking route? So a lot of the time, sometimes what you do is you kind of go, we're going to do this sort of testing. So you give them access to an internal location, an internal jump box, essentially. And you start them off at that internal jump box and say, okay, this is a database. Can you get access to that particular database that could be customer B's database? You have to make sure you chat with customer B. You cannot do it without letting them know. Okay, it's really important that they do understand that, and that everyone is fully transparent about what is going to happen. I can see Kadir typing there. That's good. While he's typing, let's have a little chat about pen testing. So pen testing, vulnerability scanning, they are two different things. Pen testing, as you said, is an ethical hacking where they will try to crack into your system by trying to hack into the data. Vulnerability scanning is different, because what you are doing with vulnerability scanning is you give them access to everything so that they can then check and look at the servers, and they get a report from your servers and they go, oh, these are the patches that are on this particular server. This is the operating system that's running here. This is the version that is on these particular Cisco switches. And they compare that essentially with a massive database that they've got that will tell them where the vulnerability scans are. Now, vulnerabilities get released by the manufacturers when they admit to them, or by other people that discover them. and they tend to get dropped onto, I mean, OWASP is basically one of them that basically deals with these. And a vulnerability scan will tell you where your vulnerabilities are, which is separate from pen testing, because pen testing, they try to break in. So vulnerabilities, you get a list that says, this is where you are vulnerable. These are the areas we think you need to patch. Does anyone not understand? Please hold your hand up or type a message if you don't understand the difference between pen testing and vulnerability scanning. That's a good way to look at it, Patrick. Yes, I like that analogy. Vulnerability testing is looking for holes in the fence. Pen testing is trying to break through that fence. That's a good way to look at it. So really what you're doing with vulnerability scanning is you can see the whole fence. So you know what's there. You can look at it and go, that's great. I can see there's a problem there, there, and there. And that essentially is vulnerability scanning. Pen testing is turning up. You can't see the whole fence, but you're going to try your hardest to break through the damn thing. Good. I like that. I like that example. I'm going to use that one, Patrick. I'm going to steal that one off you. Good stuff. Okay, so this kind of brings us through to training and awareness. Okay, very simple. 2 essential principles in there. Conduct periodic training so people know about the security. They know they should be tagging that person who has come through, who tailgated them. You know, doesn't have the badge at the right one. And implement simulated phishing attacks, security exercises. I mean, who's had phishing training? That's probably the one way. Who's had anti-phishing training recently, over the last 6 months? Show of hands here. Good ear has, perfect. You can see Daniel typing. Technically, yes, it's called my spam folder. A lot of phishing attacks can basically get through spam folders and spam systems. We are getting a lot better at it. Artificial intelligence is certainly helping us, but it's also helping the people who create the phishing emails and the phishing texts and any other phishing communication that happens. Yeah, LinkedIn is moving more towards what they term as social engineering to allow them to do spear phishing, where they know some of the details already. Okay, if you don't know anything about phishing, you haven't experienced phishing, please do grab some details because it is important that you do understand that. I recommend you do sort of a phishing update every 6 months. I force one of the companies I'm with to do phishing updates. And I think a lot of companies send around fake phishing mails that give you a link to something. And if you click on that link, you end up dropping into the IT inbox. And the IT inbox then phones you back and says, mate, you've just responded to a scam. Okay, just to boost you and kind of go, wake you up. Because it is all about basically being awake and constantly being awake and aware of phishing attacks. Scams are in full motion. That's very true. So as I say, we do simulated attacks that involve sending phishing mails to people. Okay, and if you respond to any of those phishing mails, you will get a little pop-up saying, aha, we've caught you. Okay, and a little chat and then a refreshing course. Always worth doing though. Okay, we're going to kind of round off before we drop into the conclusion. There's a little discussion there. So what security practices do you think will become more important for the data centers in the future? Share something in live chat, see what we can say. See several of you typing, that's great. AI identification, so you know when you're talking to a bot. Mostly. Kadir is also worried about AI. Oh, I tell you, we're really scared about AI. It cuts both ways, AI, doesn't it? Derek says encryption. I know most encryption nowadays is, was it 256-bit encryption, isn't it? Which is supposed to be really, really tight. Yeah, as we get more processing power, as we get more AI involvement, cracking a 256-bit encryption is potentially going to become possible, easier, quicker, I think is really what we say. We can crack it. I think they just basically said it would take 36 years to do it rather than the 5 minutes we want to do it in. So definitely encryption is going to become more and more important because we know we love our data. We want to keep our data safe. So anything that helps us keeping our data safe is going to be great. Calvin, facial recognition. Yes, improving facial recognition and our biometrics is going to become more and more important. Who thinks there's going to become a stage where they actually begin to do biometrics through your DNA testing? Remember, we only need a couple of cells. If they can improve that enough, biometric via DNA. Gideon is probably justly worried there. He says, in my view, who can guarantee these giant companies who are behind the AI, maybe one of them gets out of control slightly? We've all watched Terminator, haven't we? Scary thoughts, isn't it? 3-stage password access, DNA, facial, and password. Calvin, that'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? Jeez. There's always a toss-up between access speed and security, isn't there? You always want to be able to get hold of things quickly. Yeah, fantastic. But you always want to be able to make sure they're secure. So you make them more secure, it means you can't access them quickly because you've got to go through multi-factor authentication or a test or something like that. All of a sudden you've slowed down, haven't you? You want it quick, but you want it super safe. So it's balancing that act, isn't it? That's really where we are. Okay, perfect. Well, sort of as a conclusion then, we've spoken about physical controls, our perimeter defenses, the entry points, the guards that stand on the front door. We've spoken about our technical controls, so access policies, CCTVs, alarms, and how we protect our data centers in that way. Operational controls, making sure HR employs the right people. And when that person joins, they get the right badges. When they leave, we take away all that access. We talked about management control, assessments, auditing, making sure the auditing is good, training, making sure you are trained properly to do the right things, and your awareness to tap that person on the shoulder and go, mate, you haven't got a badge. What are you doing here? Okay, so locks, badges, readers, so devices that can help us stay secure. And we've spoken a little bit about some incidents, authorizations, and how we do some auditing on that. So that kind of brings us to a conclusion. You will note at the end of this, if you are in the KDO sessions, that there are some best practices in here. So there's some studies on some best practices, technical control details, talks about passive infrareds, microwaves, just a bit of a reiteration of what we've gone through before. Okay, but these are study guides for you. So you please feel free to refer to those when you do any of your training. And there's also a page for some extra content that you can, of course, consume at your leisure. Okay, that kind of brings us to the end. Anyone got any further questions or any further comments they'd like?